Hello and welcome to the Southwest Michigan Regional Chamber's 38th State House District Candidate Forum, hosted in partnership with News Talk Sports 94.9 WSJM. Now, before we get started, we'd like to welcome those in attendance here at the Shadowland Ballroom, as well as those tuning in live on News Talk Sports 94.9 WSJM FM, on Facebook Live, on WSJM.com, on our WSJM app, or on demand via our podcast. We'd like to acknowledge the technical support received from our friends Ken Kiespert, owner of TPC Technologies, and our engineer. Want to thank Terry Green for handling this, as well as video support from Zach East, as well as Ryan Cheevers with Little Red Fern Productions. Also, thank you also to the Shadowland Ballroom for graciously serving as the venue for tonight's event, and to Silver Beach Pizza. Yeah, there's going to be pizza. Provided not for people watching at home. We can't bring you pizza. But they'll be providing pizza appetizers for networking portions that follow this forum. I'm Johnny Reinhart from News Talk Sports 94.9 WSJM. I'll be co-moderating tonight's event alongside Arthur Havlicek, President and CEO of the Southwest Michigan Regional Chamber of Commerce. Arthur, why don't you tell everybody what to expect this evening?
Thank you, Johnny. Thank you to WSJM and all who partnered with us to make this public service possible. As the voice for business in the region, our chamber has a responsibility to communicate where those seeking public office stand on matters important to our members and our community. Michigan's new legislative districts present several opportunities to engage in this important work, and this race is no exception. A product of Michigan's Independent Redistricting Commission, the new 38th House District depicted on the easel hugs the shoreline of Southwest Michigan and stretches nearly 80 miles across 3 different counties. Without an incumbent running for re-election, it is the region's only open seat and is expected to be one of the most competitive primary and general elections for both sides of the aisle this cycle. A total of 5 candidates have filed to represent the district, and all 5 are in attendance tonight. We're pleased to provide them with a platform to share their views with voters before the August primary next month. Candidates, tonight we'll ask you a series of questions compiled by our team at the Chamber in concert with the WSJM News team. You'll be afforded 1 minute to answer each question, and we will be determining the response order by random drawing throughout the night. As moderators, we will also reserve the right to ask follow-up questions if additional clarification is needed. Listen carefully, answer concisely, and try to differentiate yourselves from your opponents. With that, let's get started with your introductory statements. Again, you'll have 1 minute. Please try to include why you're running for office and which party you're running under.
And the first person to do that will be Joey Andrews. Joey, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Joey Andrews, running for the 38th State House District as a Democrat this year. I'm a 20-year resident of St. Joe, and my family's lived in Southwest Michigan for 150 years, going way back. I work as an attorney and a policy analyst for the Michigan AFL-CIO, where I work on labor and local municipal policy. And I'm running for office because I feel like our communities here in the 38th District are at a crossroads. We have to decide what we're going to be going forward, whether we're going to go all in on just tourism and resorts, or if we're going to truly be a place where families can raise their kids, work, and achieve the middle-class dream that my family had before me. I believe that's what we should be attempting to achieve. My goal as state representative. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next is Kevin Whiteford. Kevin, you have 1 minute.
First of all, I want to say thank you for having this. The Chamber's amazing for doing this. I am Kevin Whiteford. I have been with my wife for almost 38 years. I live in South Haven. I have 3 kids, 4 grandkids. They also live in South Haven. What I want is I want your kids and grandkids to flourish in this district like mine will, I hope. And that is what I'm going to try to do. I graduated out of college in 1986. I played basketball and earned an accounting and a CPA certificate. I used those educational skills to help out thousands of small businesses over my years. When I knocked on approximately 10,000 doors here in this district, I've heard the voices. They have, it's amazing. It's loaded with businesses and business owners, just like us. They've had governmental issues and they've had state issues. I will be their voice in Lansing, and I hope to get your vote August 2nd. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Annie Brown. Annie, you have 1 minute. Thank you.
I'm Annie Brown. I'm running for state representative in the 38th district. I'm running to protect our reproductive rights, expand affordable housing, expand mental health care, and empower our teachers and support our public schools. I have 3 adult children. My husband and I started and owned a small business for 20 years. I was elected and served on the South Haven School Board for 13 years. And I'm very active in our community. I serve on the boards of the Van Buren County Senior Services and United Christian Services of Van Buren County. I've lived in this district for 37 years. This is my home. I will work with Republicans and Democrats and everybody in the middle to get the job done. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Troy Rowling. You have 1 minute now.
Good evening. My name is Troy Rowling. I am a Republican candidate, born and raised in the community.
Right there, just tap the...
My bad. My name is Troy Rowling. I'm a Republican candidate for state representative. I've been in this community my whole life. My family has been here since 1918. I'm a family man. I've been married for 24 years this year. I have 4 kids, 2 in Lakeshore Public Schools and 2 going to college over in Kalamazoo. I have a degree in government. I run a small business in the community. The reason why I'm running is because we need to protect parental rights in education. I think it's under threat. Skilled trades is another thing that we need to look at. We have too many kids being told that the only way to success in life is to go to college. That is not true. We need to aggressively help kids to understand that there is more than one pathway to success. And
Thank you.
finally, inflation.
Thank you.
Okay.
And next is George Lucas. George, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is George Lucas, and I'm a Republican candidate for this 38th district seat. I've had a presence in southwestern Michigan for my entire life. And for the last 23 years, I've been a real estate broker. And the experience as a real estate broker has given me a really deep understanding of our area. If you're new in town and you want to find out what's going on, pop into a real estate office and you'll find out. I've also been very active in my community. I've been the president of Chickaming Open Lands, the Land Conservancy in Sawyer, and I've also been president of the Southwestern Michigan Association of Realtors. My number one priority is to work with others to make Michigan a top 10 state for economic and population growth. And I'd also like to work to broaden the economy here in southwestern Michigan.
Thank you.
Next question. Just 1 week ago, a record-breaking $76 billion budget for the 2023 fiscal year was passed and signed into law, fueled by leftover emergency federal dollars and better than expected income and sales tax revenues. This represents a nearly 30% increase in state spending from just 3.5 years ago. Do you believe this level of government spending is sustainable for Michigan moving forward? If elected, what budgetary reforms, if any, would you advocate for in the coming years?
And the first person with a chance to answer that is Kevin Whiteford. You have 1 minute starting now.
This is an easy one. I'm going to say we need to work on many things. First of all, I looked at one of the items. We've raised a decent amount of money in marijuana tax and gambling taxes. Why in the world would we not take the number that was raised by that and reduce the income tax for all Michiganders? I think as a tax accountant and a tax expert who was well known nationally at one point at the age of 28, I'm going to use these skills and figure out how to tear apart the income tax and figure out how to lower the income tax. I really think there's ways to help every Michigan resident here. And that is what I'm going to do. I think you got to look at the cost. So that's what I would do. I would look at all the numbers. Thank you.
Thank you. Next to answer that would be George Lucas. George, you have 1 minute.
quite frankly, before this budget, I thought spending was too high to begin with. The 30% bump, that is astronomical. Anytime you spend 30% more year over year, that is a significant increase. My hope is that some of these costs that we're paying for in this budget are one-time expenses, and after we're through, and after we're making up for the deficit of, or the additional monies that we need to spend to recover from COVID, I'd like to see us get back to a point where we're funding things the way we were prior to this budget increase.
Thank you. Next, Annie Brown, you have 1 minute starting now.
I was pleased to see the budget announcement. I think it reflects our priorities. We are slowly recovering from COVID, and what the international worldwide pandemic revealed to us was the cracks in our armor, and those areas are accessible internet. There are still children and students and teachers and business owners who today don't have access to the internet, and that has been going on for decades before COVID, and now we see what a big problem it is. Our other weakness is the lack of mental health care. That is included in the budget. Here in St. Joseph, Spectrum has inpatient beds for adults who need inpatient psychiatric care, but not for adolescents.
Thank you.
Clearly, our schools need more social workers.
Next up, Troy Rolling. Troy, you have 1 minute starting now.
$76 billion, and a lot of the money that was added to that budget was money that was brought over from last year's budget, unused money. I would say the best way to handle that is to give the money back to the people. Right now, everybody is dealing with a shortfall. You could say put it in the rainy day fund, but a lot of people right now, rainy day funds is running out. They're burning through their rainy day fund. So let's take those dollars, give it back to the people that they came from, let them use them to buy another loaf of bread, to buy another gallon of milk, buy this $5 gallon in gas, and let them live on that. I mean, we can't just continue to take money. In this whole thought process, this is a Republican state house. These are conservative. This increasing the budget is not a conservative principle. We need to find ways to cut.
And last for this question is Joey Andrews. Mr. Andrews, you have 1 minute starting now.
Yeah, so I think, as was stated, there were a lot of one-time expenses in the new budget. That was a lot of where the emergency funds were earmarked for, was for the state and local municipalities to do kind of one-shot improvements, infrastructure expenses, et cetera. So a lot of this budget isn't going to be an ongoing increase, which I think, helps to temper that large 30% number that we're looking at. But I would also say a lot of these increases in other areas are a long time coming. Our schools in Michigan have been crumbling for decades now. I mean, we have several schools just, in the immediate area, Benton Harbor High School, for instance, that needs a lot of help. And we don't pay our teachers enough. We don't have enough support staff in our schools. There's not enough school counselors. Teachers are overburdened. And I think, some of the increases in the education budget in particular are ones that I hope will carry forward, keep improving on. So, I hope that in many ways this budget is a start for us to look forward and figure out how we can keep building our state.
Thank you. Arthur, next question.
We're going to ask the audience to refrain from clapping out of respect for those following us online. Next question will give you an opportunity to build on much of what you just said. As large as the recently passed budget was, there is still roughly $7 billion left unspent on the state's balance sheet. Some in the House want to use this opportunity for an income tax cut. Some in the Senate would like to see a gas tax holiday. The governor has indicated that she'd like to see targeted tax cuts for seniors and low-income folks, but she'd also like to see more money put into the state's economic development fund. How would you propose allocating the remaining $7 billion in a manner that makes Michigan a more competitive place to do business and a more attractive place to live?
And first person to answer that, even though I put everything back in the box, random drawing here. Joey Andrews, you have a chance to answer that first. You have 1 minute starting now.
Sure. So as far as areas where we could give back, I think getting rid of the pension tax is one of the easiest tax cuts that we could give to residents in Michigan right now. People with pensions already paid taxes when they put the money into their pension funds, and making them pay taxes again on the way out is unfair to people living on fixed incomes. So if we have a surplus in the budget, I think one of the easiest cuts immediately to make is to get rid of that pension tax and help our seniors who've already given so much of their lives to our state and give them the break they deserve. But from there, I think a lot of this leftover money represents an unwillingness for people in Lansing to work together to figure out what projects need investing in. So much of this gets left on the table because of partisan infighting. And I think one of the major things that we need to focus on in Lansing is figuring out how we can make deals and come to consensus in order to invest in the critical needs of our state, getting beyond these kind of partisan squabbles over elections and putting the money where it matters most, because our state needs reinvestment and it needs it badly.
Thank you. Next to answer this question, George Lucas. Mr. Lucas, you have 1 minute starting now.
One of the most common things that I hear when I'm knocking doors is inflation. People are upset and they're getting hurt. I've literally knocked on doors where people are making the choice between gasoline and food. I'd like to take the overage in the budget. I'd like to put in a tax cut for working people, and that will give them the relief directly to give them some relief from the inflation, because people are in trouble. Things are getting more expensive. Their wages aren't going up as quickly as possible. And I think that one thing the state can do is immediately to reduce taxes and put money in people's pockets.
Thank you. Next, Annie Brown. Ms. Brown, you have 1 minute starting now.
As a former teacher and a school board member, public education is always my top priority. So I want to make sure that even though the budget includes spending for our schools, I want to make sure that that is adequate and what our teachers need. I would support funding going into economic development to provide infrastructure, transportation for training, and childcare. And I'm also concerned as a small business owner about small businesses. They've just come through a terrible time, and there are still businesses that have permanently closed or are for sale. So I want to make sure that our small businesses have what they need to continue to stay open.
Thank you. Next, Kevin Whiteford. Kevin, or Mr. Whiteford, you have 1 minute starting now.
I'm a financial advisor. I'm a CPA. I'm a tax expert. This is an easy question. When somebody inherits money, I tell them a couple of things. I say, wait, honestly, the $7 billion, let's answer the question that he actually gave us. What are we going to do with the $7 billion? The $7 billion was not expected. It came from the federal government. I would do long-term projects, things that need fixing long-term. That is child facilities for mental illness in various parts of this state. I would also look at paying down the debt. I tell you this, when I get a windfall, I get a client that gets a windfall, pay down some debt. Why not? That's long-term. You take an asset that comes in that you don't expect, and you create long-term positive reaction. And that is paying down debt, building infrastructure for this state. You don't, and if you want to talk about the income taxes like they did a couple times, we need a permanent solution to income taxes. You don't use the $7 billion for that. Thank you.
And last for this round of questions, Troy Rowling. Mr. Rowling, you have 1 minute starting now.
$7 billion of your money. What would you want the government to do with your money? You would want them to give it back to you if they're not going to use it. That's the best way to handle that. A lot of the extra money that the state has got is a result of the president's Build Back Better. All the resources that came from that is flooding into the states. We don't need, the state does not need to keep that $7 billion. We need to give it back to people so that they can spend the money the way they want. They need that extra money to do things they need, not the state government. It's not their money. That's it.
Thank you. And if you're just joining us, this is News Talk Sports 94.9 WSJM. It's the 38th State House District Candidate Forum alongside the Southwest Michigan Regional Chamber. Next question, Arthur. What's next?
Michigan's primary mechanism for funding road repairs and improvements is through a gas tax paid at the pump. With automotive companies moving more and more towards electric vehicles, this road funding model is becoming increasingly unsustainable. What would your proposal be for a new model to fund road improvements in the future?
And first person with the opportunity to answer this will be George Lucas. Mr. Lucas, you have 1 minute starting now.
Okay. Well, I've read where there's devices where you can track the number of miles and you report it to the government, and then you pay a certain fee per mile. And I guess that's a good way to go. It's a good way to keep track of it, but it also involves privacy issues because now you have somebody tracking where you're going, what you're doing. So I'm not sure that's the best way to approach this. I've had conversations with people from the Michigan Department of Transportation about this, and at this point anyway, the amount of electric cars on the road is negligible relative to the entire amount of miles driven. So I think at least initially, until electronic cars become more prominent, simply charging a higher annual fee for electric cars could probably fill that gap.
Thank you. Next to answer this question, Troy Rowling. Mr. Rowling, you have 1 minute starting now.
So we are supposed to figure out what it means to take people who has electric cars because they decide and find a tax for them to come fix the roads. There's a lot of money in the budget right now. I mean, we're doing a lot of things right now to flood the system with dollars to fix everything. And when the federal government's pouring money into the system, we have a lot of money in that system to be able to do that. Until there is a lot of electric cars in the system, I can't see us using or finding a way to charge more people for using electric cars to save dollars. I can't see that right now. I would have to really seriously look at that and come back to it.
Thank you. Next for this question, Annie Brown. Ms. Brown, you have 1 minute starting now.
I actually think that charging higher fees on electrical vehicles is the wrong thing to do because we want to reward owners of vehicles that are good for our environment. If anything, I would increase fees on vehicles that are not energy efficient and that are bad for the roads, that are creating potholes, that are bad with their emissions. That's my feeling.
Thank you. Next, Joey Andrews. Mr. Andrews, you have 1 minute starting now.
Yeah, so I think, this is something we really have to consider because as electric vehicle usage expands and ideally, fossil fuel driven vehicle usage declines, we still have to use our roads. I think there's a couple of fairly simple solutions here. Right now, charging stations are basically being subsidized by ratepayers. Like if you go and charge your car up at the Panera down the road, like where the Tesla stations are, your use of that electricity is essentially being subsidized by everybody else right now. So I think like a surcharge attached to electric charging stations would probably be a very easy way to recoup a lot of that expense. Honestly, an increase in the corporate tax rate would be a great way to start addressing fixing the roads, especially given that gas taxes in general are regressive taxes that put a lot of the burden on working people and working families who aren't really the ones doing most of the damage to the roads in the first place. So I think, shifting a lot of that burden over into the corporate tax bracket, as well as maybe some, like I said, minor surcharges on charging stations would probably go a long way.
Thank you. And last for this question, Kevin Whiteford. Mr. Whiteford, you have 1 minute starting now.
I am so glad going last. I'll tell you why. My businesses are in about 12 chambers. We have not addressed cost. I'm a CPA, I'm a businessman. What are the costs? How the heck do you identify or address the revenue side unless you understand the cost of roads? I went to a special meeting at the Grand Rapids Chamber that was pulled together by the DeVosses and Myers because they wanted MDOT on the hot seat and say, hey, where are you coming up with your costs? One of the cool things about that meeting, by the way, is the rock and the stone that we have been using here in the state for decades. Well, I called what? Business friends that I have that supply rocks for the roads. I said, hey, is there an easier or better way to do this? There was. I said, hey, man, can we relay that stuff to MDOT and figure this out? They did. We got to understand. I think the gas taxes, that has to go towards the road. We have to figure out, hey, gas is going to go there. We have to figure out education has to be certain amount funded every year.
Thank you.
So we have to figure that out. But we have to identify the cost. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next question. Palisades Power Plant, located in your district, was shut down on the same day that North American Electric Reliability Corporation, NERC, issued a report saying that the U.S. electric grid does not have enough generation capacity. Blackouts are almost certain to occur across the country this summer. This energy supply-demand imbalance threatens the productivity of Michigan businesses and all those who need reliable energy to go about their daily lives. Do you believe we're moving towards a future of renewables too quickly? And what can the legislature do to ensure we have the power we need today while also pursuing the energy landscape of the future?
And first person to answer that will be Annie Brown. Ms. Brown, you have 1 minute starting now.
I don't think we're moving too quickly towards renewable energy at all. I think this is a good place for us to increase our renewable energy. You can see that we're having plenty of sunny days. We have winds off of Lake Michigan that can help generate wind energy, and our families need reliable energy. We are having blackouts and brownouts on a regular basis without any reimbursement to families who are losing their energy and losing their ability to work from home. So I am a big proponent of renewable energy.
Thank you. And next for this question, Troy Rowling. Mr. Rowling, you have 1 minute starting now.
I don't think anybody want to see windmills sitting off Lake Michigan. I mean, I don't. I love the view. I love everything about it. I've been born and raised around it. Don't change that landscape. Looking at renewable energy and how we can now try to look at down the road and how we can start trying to make that work for us is we have plenty of resources in my mind in the ground. I don't think looking at that at this point in time, trying to move away from fossil fuels. I know there's a lot of people that say, yeah, let's move away from fossil fuels. I think we were a blessed nation and we should use what we got until we don't have it, until we have to.
Thank you. And next for this question, Kevin Whiteford. Mr. Whiteford, you have 1 minute starting now.
To answer the question, absolutely, we're moving too fast. You're not going to ruin people's lives. You're not going to ruin businesses to move from A to Z. I've got a 25-year-old in my business. He's been instrumental. So let's face it. We want renewable energy. We want to move in that direction. There's no doubt about it. But we don't want to ruin people's lives over this. Are you kidding me? No, we need to figure this out. We have to be energy independent. We saw what happened in Europe. They made a mistake. Our president made a huge mistake on January 2nd, shutting down. I know those independent owners down in Texas. I've got business in 27 states. Those guys got hurt when he shut down independent, small little businesses who were producing oil just for the use in this country. That's crazy talk. We needed to not ruin people's lives. The government has to not get so involved. That's crazy too. I'm a Republican because government needs to get out of the way a lot more than they are now. Thank you.
Thank you. And next for this question, George Lucas. Mr. Lucas, you have 1 minute starting now.
Thank you. I think that renewable energy could be part of our future for generating electricity, but we're just not there yet. The technology is not there to replace the energy that we get, the electricity we get from carbon fuels. And what concerns me is that it seems like our federal government and our state government have a war on carbon. They want to get rid of it as soon as they possibly can. And when you start removing energy sources without having viable sources to replace them, that's ludicrous. That's putting us in a position where our energy grid can go down. We're going to have, now they're predicting rolling blackouts. And it just shouldn't be, because guess what? It doesn't have to be. If we're going to transition to renewable fuels, that's great. I think it's going to take a lot longer than people who are pushing it would like it to be, but so be it. We just can't ruin our way of life, and we can't ruin our economy to meet
Thank you.
somebody's arbitrary goal.
And lastly for this question, Joey Andrews. Mr. Andrews, you have 1 minute starting now.
So I actually owned a small business in the solar energy installation industry, and I can tell you that the technology in the solar industry is there. The issue is that the grid functions on a three-tiered level. There's a base load to the grid, an intermediate load to the grid, and a peak load to the grid. Solar and renewable energies are very good at managing intermediate and peak loads. They're not so great at managing base loads. Currently, our choices for base loading the grid are coal, gas, and nuclear. Our district is blessed with 2 nuclear reactors, used to be 3 before we lost Palisades. If we want to be able to get off carbon fuel sources, which I strongly believe we need to do, we need to move away from coal, gas, and oil as energy sources and fuel sources. The solution is a combination of new, modern, safe nuclear power plants and renewable energy like solar and wind working in tandem to fuel our grid. And we have the ability here in Michigan to do that. The Cook plant in Bridgman has the capacity to add 2 more nuclear reactors to it if we would just make the investment. I think we should do that, and I think we should get Palisades back online.
Thank you. And again, please refrain from applause or comments or anything like that, as we have people watching online and WSJM.com as well. And this is the 38th State House District Candidate Forum with News Talk Sports 94.9 WSJM and the Southwest Michigan Regional Chamber. I'm Johnny Reinhardt alongside Arthur Havlicek. Arthur, next question, please.
Michigan is the second most diverse agricultural state in the nation, and agriculture is a major economic driver for our region. What, in your mind, are the top 2 issues facing our farmers, producers, and processors, and what can the legislature do to alleviate those burdens?
And next person to answer that will be Troy Rolling. Mr. Rolling, you have 1 minute starting now.
Top 2 things that our farmers are dealing with right now. One is inflation. I got a farmer friend of mine who buys 1 ton of fertilizer. It cost him 280% more than it did last year. Fuel, just to deliver the food that we get every day, it went up. It's a big issue with farmers. Regulation is another issue. Every time we put a regulation in place, farmers have to change how they do business. It's too many regulations, and it's hurting farm businesses, and it's hurting what farmers are able to do. Yes, I know it's important to make sure that the food that we get is right and protected, but we can't regulate farmers out of being able to either make a profit or do the right thing that they know. They know how to do the right things already. They're farmers. They want to stay in business.
Thank you. And next to answer this one will be Kevin Whiteford. Mr. Whiteford, you have 1 minute starting now.
You know, one of the sad things that happened just recently, right, is they redistricted the entire state. Allegan County is a big part of agriculture in this state, and they split it into 6 different state rep seats. So to protect that, we're going to have to work with those state reps to make sure that they come together and figure out how to fix that. But one way to understand all this stuff as an accountant, again, I love visiting places, love touching stuff. I've been to the egg farmer, I've been to the cow farmer, I've been to the pig farmer, I've been to the fruit farmers. You need to go there and figure out what their problems are and what their issues are. And I have done that. I think it's actually kind of fun. We got a farm in Allegan County that has 3.5 million chickens laying eggs every day. It's amazing. We have some cool stuff in this state. We need to protect it, just like we need to protect this lakeshore. We need to protect the incredible things that we have here. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Joey Andrews. Mr. Andrews, you have 1 minute starting now.
Yeah, so I think probably the biggest issue facing the agricultural community today is the monopolization of agriculture in general. You have a lot of small farms being gobbled up by increasingly growing smaller number of large real estate and agricultural industries. This reduces competition in the field. It also makes it virtually unsustainable for small farmers to compete, getting their produce to market. We have anti-monopoly laws on the books. We could be enforcing those. We need to be enforcing those in order to make it sustainable again for ordinary people to farm and be part of this. The other thing is, I think, the disconnect between people and their food supply at this point. Farmers markets are a nice thing, but when I was a kid, we used to be able to go to local farms and pick fresh fruits and vegetables, and there was a real connection to the land and to where our food supply was coming from that is increasingly being lost. I think we need to rebuild the connection between our cities and suburbs and our rural communities in that regard.
Thank you. Next, George Lucas. Mr. Lucas, you have 1 minute starting now.
I was just talking with one of my farmer friends last night at dinner, and we talked about this a couple months earlier, and the cost of inputs, so seed, fertilizer, diesel fuel, everything it takes to grow a crop, the costs are rising at an astronomical rate. The other thing that compounds it is that some of these materials, due to supply chain issues, they can't even get them. So there are farmers who are not planting a crop this year because they didn't believe that the prices were going to be that high and they were going to come down, and then they couldn't actually get some of the materials that they need to grow a crop. And the cost of food is ridiculous. I bought Michigan corn on the cob last weekend, and it was $1 an ear. It was unbelievable. The cost of food is just crazy. I think that regulations are burdensome on farmers. They should have a little more latitude in what they can do to grow a crop. They're the experts.
Thank you. And lastly, for this question, Annie Brown. Mrs. Brown, you have 1 minute starting now.
As I like to tell, As I like to tell people,
There you go.
As I like to tell people, we live in the blueberry buckle of Michigan's fruit belt. And two of the biggest problems that I've heard of are access to water for farmers. So areas of water are drying up, and even farmers and residential owners are looking for new places to dig wells. Another concern, of course, is the supply chain. Blueberry farmers are waiting for equipment and supplies from 10 miles away, and they can't get a truck driver to deliver it. So I look forward to serving on the House Agriculture Committee when I'm in Lansing.
Thank you. Arthur?
The next question. Michigan will spend more than $9,000 per student in the coming year, a record amount. And yet enrollment across the state is down, and Michigan's academic achievement numbers lag the rest of the country. Moreover, employers are consistently saying the workforce does not have the proper skills to match job opportunities. What changes do you believe need to happen to make Michigan a top 10 state for education and job readiness?
And first person to have the opportunity to answer this, Kevin Whiteford. Mr. Whiteford, you have 1 minute starting now.
I love this question again. Like I said, I've knocked on a lot of doors. This 38th district is loaded with teachers. Why don't we get back to teaching the student? These teachers, by the way, are dying to teach the students. They don't want the government to dictate how they should teach the students. They want to teach the students how they learned. They've got a 4-year degree from school. Let them teach. My opinion is when I got taught, I can tell you this, I was about 2 grades ahead of everybody on math and about a grade below on English. When I got taught as a kid, they taught me at those levels that I needed. We need to get back to that. We need to get back to teaching the student and not teaching to the test. Again, I think we're looking at the cost of doing something. Make it simpler, do it the way the teachers want to, and then I think things are gonna go down in cost. So my opinion is, let's get the teachers more involved in how to teach the students. Thank you.
Thank you.
And the parents.
Got that last second in there. Good job. Next up, we have Troy Rowling. You have 1 minute, Mr. Rowling, starting now.
So I think the biggest thing that we deal with right now is making sure that our kids come out of school understanding that a high school degree is supposed to prepare you for life. Right now, we're teaching kids to go to college. College is the next phase in life. We need to help kids understand that skilled trade is definitely a possibility. We want to start building more houses. You want to start laying more brick. You want to start pouring more concrete or finding more plumbers or electricians. If we don't start the work, we can't find people to take these jobs. There's plenty of these jobs that's sitting out there. We just can't find people to take them. So we need to start producing them outside of high school. They come out of high school, it's better, in my mind, to help a kid understand that they don't have to take on a $60,000, $75,000 debt to go to college. They can go get a $40,000 job laying concrete.
Thank you. Next, Annie Brown. Ms. Brown, you have 1 minute, starting now.
Thank you. I believe that we need that money to reduce the inequity in per pupil spending. For example, in New Buffalo, their school receives $25,000 per student because it's out of formula. And in South Haven, it has been around $8,000 per student. So that's where we need the funding to make a difference. I think that we need to find what businesses need. For example, Do It Corporation in South Haven, the owner, Mark McClendon, has said, all I need are high school graduates who are good in math. So we need to make that connection between what our local businesses and industry need and what our high school can provide. I believe in supporting our intermediate school districts that have trade classes like automotive repair and HVAC and building and construction trades.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And next, Joey Andrews. Mr. Andrews, you have 1 minute, starting now.
Yeah, I think it's important to think not so much about what the number is, but where that money is going. And I think one of the big issues we have right now is that to be a teacher, you basically have to be a teacher, a therapist, a social worker, and in some cases a security guard, which is more than anybody went to school for and more than anybody should be asked for. If we invested in adding more school counselors into our school system, a lot of these problems would get addressed, including the workforce issue, because right now, school counselors aren't able to spend the individual time with each student that they're supposed to be able to do to design independent education plans for each student and get them on the path that's right for them. We have to bring the skilled trades back into schools. That's absolutely true. There's a shortage of tradesmen. There's a shortage of skilled trades workers, engineers, mechanics, plumbers, everything. But we have to be pushing those kids that are ready for that path onto that path. And that's what the counselors are there for, but they can't do it when the ratio is 500 students per counselor. I think making sure that we're investing those dollars correctly goes a long way to making sure that we can fill all of these needs.
Thank you. And lastly, for this question, George Lucas. Mr. Lucas, you have 1 minute, starting now.
You know, it's frustrating when you look at the record amounts of money that we're spending on education and how it correlates to the poor performance in the classroom. Somebody told me that the rate of spending for administration in schools has gone up 900%. So, you know, in schools they're putting in AstroTurf football fields. A lot of money is being spent on schools, but it's not necessarily being spent on education. And I too agree, and I think this might be the only bipartisan issue of the night, is that we need to start preparing kids to become work ready. If they're not going to go to college, they should be able to graduate with some skill or some specialization or some certification to begin work doing something immediately.
Thank you.
As alluded to in the previous question, the number one issue we hear from our members is that they are desperate to find labor. To give you an idea, our Tri-County area has 5,000 fewer workers than it did just 2 years ago, and there are currently over 1,000 more job openings in our area than unemployed individuals to fill them. What do you believe contributed to our labor shortage? And if elected, what policies would you promote to increase our labor force participation rate?
First person for the opportunity to answer this, Joey Andrews. Mr. Andrews, you have 1 minute starting now.
So I think we're all aware that, as of the pandemic, a lot of people opted to take early retirement, some cases 5 and 6 years earlier than they would have. Couple that with, hundreds of thousands of people dying during the global pandemic. And you can see pretty quickly where workforce shortages might start appearing. In addition to that, our area has become very difficult to afford housing in for workers in general. So you start adding all these things on top of each other and you end up with a pretty steep workforce shortage. So how do we address this? One, affordable housing. If we can get affordable worker housing into our communities, we can start to bring workers back. People want to live here. They want to work here. They can't afford it. I think that would begin to address the problem immediately. The other thing is career and technical training centers, not just in schools. Through the Workforce Development Institute at the AFL, we've been working on bringing training centers into cities like Benton Harbor in order for young adults, 20, 30, 40 years old, to get retrained into shovel-ready careers, hooked up with good union jobs, which helps to also offset that problem.
Thank you. And next person, Troy Rowling. Mr. Rowling, you have 1 minute starting now.
Workforce participation was affected by the glut of money that we received from federal government. People didn't want to work anymore. Why would I work if I could make $500? I make $500 doing this, and the federal government will send me $500. Why do I need to do that? And so after a while, you create a monster that doesn't want to do anything at all. They want to stay at home and find ways to skate a job or not go to work or whatever. It goes back to what I said originally. Everybody right now is having a hard time finding people to work. Okay, so is there a generation lost? I don't know. But if it starts in public schooling. We affect that. We pay our tax dollars to make sure that when those people come out of that public school, they are work ready.
Thank you.
That's what we need to do, and we need to focus there.
And next person to answer this one, George Lucas. Mr. Lucas, you have 1 minute starting now.
I think one of the major downsides of the pandemic and how it was handled is that people discovered that there's enough government subsidies out there to make it real easy for them to not to work. From the enhanced unemployment benefits to mortgage forbearance, student loan forbearance, rent forbearance, food stamps, and just go right down the list. People over a period of months figured out that there's a way to subsist without working. And it shows in the attitudes that people that do go out and get a job. I was talking with a small business guy, and he said that when he hires somebody, he doesn't spend any time training them for the first week because he's not sure. He said training costs money, and he's not sure if they're going to show up. So he wants to see if they'll show up for a week before he's going to invest any money in them. So I think we created a monster here, and or a genie, and you get the genie or the monster back in the bottle. But
Thank you.
Work should be more meaningful.
Next to answer this question, Kevin Whiteford. Mr. Whiteford, you have 1 minute starting now.
I've already told you guys a lot that I have an amazing amount of experience with businesses, period. Just in the last 5 years, our businesses have brought in 39 different families from out of state to help us with the operations. I'm going to tell you, we've got two examples of why this is all messed up. Back in 2008, the federal government got involved in extended unemployment. And they kept extending it and extending it and extending it. And then all of a sudden, you got people who said, you know what, I just don't want to go back to work, period. We created a class of people who don't want to work. Not we, the federal government. The second thing that happened was what? Well, yeah, when we start handing out money and we don't stop giving out money for not working, that's not good. We got Governor Whitmer just proposing to give out $500 to every resident in the state of Michigan. No, if you're going to give out money to people that are working. Don't give money to people who are not working. This is crazy. We have to incentivize workers, not non-workers. And the government has been involved way too long. Thank you.
And last for this question, Annie Brown. Ms. Brown, you have 1 minute starting now.
If you want more workers, raise wages and increase benefits. That's it.
That's
Okay.
it.
Okay. Arthur, next question.
Southwest Michigan's labor crisis is further exacerbated by a housing shortage that severely limits our businesses' ability to attract and retain talent in this area. More than that, it inhibits our ability
There's no doubt that there's a housing crisis in southwestern Michigan and in this country in general. And there are many barriers to building affordable housing. I think from a state standpoint that we could take a look at the zoning laws to allow for smaller homes, smaller square footage homes, and higher density. I think there also needs to be a change in attitude from communities. It's, everybody says, oh, we don't have enough affordable housing in our community. But when a developer comes along and proposes it and the neighbors get up in arms, it's like, well, we don't want that in our community. They cave. So there needs to be some leadership at the local level too. That's my quick 1 minute answer.
All right. Thank you. Next up, Troy Rowling. You have 1 minute, Mr. Rowling, starting now.
I don't think the government can do anything at all. It goes back to the amount of people that you have to be able to do the work. If there is no workers to build houses, I can create an incentive. If there's no people to do it, then the incentive is a waste of time. We need people to be able to produce and build houses, and goes back to what I said with skilled trades and workforce participation and things of that nature. If we don't have the people to work, we can do all we can to put out incentives from the state level. It does not mean that it's going to happen. It's going to sit there and wait until we have people to be able to build the housing or lay the brick or whatever.
Thank you. Next up, Annie Brown. Mrs. Brown, you have 1 minute starting now.
Expanding affordable housing is one of my top priorities. I think that we need housing for low-income families, for workers like our teachers, our nurses, our transportation workers, and also just a mixed income home. But these need to be homes built in neighborhoods by local contractors, by bricklayers, by builders. I think Muskegon does a great job. The city of Muskegon buys up vacant lots, hires a contractor to build homes, and then they are sold for under $200,000. I think that's a great way to do it. But yes, the government can help out with funding that builds homes for people in neighborhoods so they can live in the neighborhoods and not just a complex where they just sleep, wake up, and go to work.
Thank you. Next up, Kevin Whiteford. Mr. Whiteford, you have 1 minute starting now.
I love this question because I've attacked this question about 8 or 9 years ago. I was working with some businesses that want to relocate to the Midwest, because I've got contacts in all 50 states. I said, it's going to be Michigan. I want to figure it out. Well, I was talking to them, and I said, hey, okay, cool, they can do it. They're going to spend $25-30 million. They want to bring 500 jobs. You know what? They said, well, you don't have enough housing. I said, okay, I'll fix that. I went to a local city, and I said, hey, I need to fix and I need to build 250 to 400 houses. I got the people that I can do this. They had a $22,500 hookup fee. That's what the city fee is for a $150,000 house. I said, it's impossible. It's not cost justifiable. We have people who want housing, but the local jurisdictions in some cases won't allow it because they have issues in between. I am currently building properties in Berrien County because I want to solve this problem. I'm building houses that are 525 square feet to 1,050 square feet because I think that is the future house. And I want to do this at big scale. And I want to show people that it can be done.
Thank you.
So I'm doing it. Thanks.
And for those watching online, if you may have missed the question, I know we had a little bit of loss there in signal. Arthur, will you read the question one more time? Just the question part.
What can the legislature do at a statewide level to help increase Michigan's housing supply for all income levels?
And last to answer this one, Joey Andrews. Mr. Andrews, you have 1 minute starting now.
I think there are two quick things that we can do on this. One, especially locally, we have to get the short-term vacation rental crisis under control in our communities along the coastline. That's driving prices astronomically through the roof, making it unaffordable for people to buy the houses that are there, especially when large real estate companies swoop in, buy up all of the property, and then rent them out at high rates for high profit. If we can create better toolkits for our local municipalities to regulate and keep the short-term rental industry under control, we can right away bring down housing costs in our communities. The second thing has to do with the cost to build. My dad was a residential builder, and currently it's basically not profitable to build the kind of housing that workers and middle-class families would live in. So I think the state needs to step in and needs to provide a subsidy so that we can build apartments, duplexes, triplexes, small single-family homes, and density more than anything in our communities. And I don't think there's any way for builders to do that without the government stepping in and helping to subsidize the cost.
Thank you. And you're listening to the 38th State House District Candidate Forum here on News Talk Sports 94.9 WSJM FM, St. Joseph, Benton Harbor. And we are here at the Shadowland Ballroom with the Southwest Michigan Regional Chamber with candidates from both the Republican side as well as the Democratic side. And we've gone through quite a lot of questions, but we're up to our next one here. Arthur, what is our next question?
For the next question, we're going to stay on the topic of housing. Short-term rentals have become a divisive subject in many coastal communities that comprise the new 38th district. So far, each community has taken a different approach to managing them within their jurisdiction, but that may change if Michigan's legislature passes legislation that preempts local control and places parameters on how these local governments can regulate them. Are you for or against regulating short-term rentals at the state level? Would you support House Bill 4722 as written? And if not, what would be your proposed solution?
First person the opportunity to answer this, George Lucas. Mr. Lucas, you have 1 minute starting now.
Well, you know what, Michigan, our southwestern Michigan, one of our biggest economies is the tourist economy. And short-term rentals are a key component of the tourist economy. I support House Bill 4722. What it does is it prevents local municipalities from simply banning the activity of short-term rentals. And what it does do is it encourages municipalities to regulate the rentals through health, safety, and nuisance. If they were to control the occupancy, require a certain amount of garbage receptacles, require a certain amount of off-street parking and things like that, that short-term rentals could peaceably coexist in a neighborhood with single-family residential homes.
Thank you. And next to answer this one, Kevin Whiteford. Mr. Whiteford, you have 1 minute starting now.
When I first announced to run, I knew this was one of the first and biggest questions out there. So what did I do? Sat down with all the city managers and all the city mayors, because you need to figure out what the heck is going on, right? Well, New Buffalo, they got about 95% tourism. St. Joe, 10%. South Haven is about 65%. You have to understand that each one of these communities do have similar issues, but they are different. The other thing you got to realize is in Casco Township, which is where I live, they actually have a law and rules that are in the books, and they actually work. So there's a situation where you got a local township that has a set of rules and they're actually working. Why are the other townships and cities not looking at that? What did I do? I said, hey, you got to look at it. I'm a real estate owner. I do believe in property rights, but we have to sit down and get at the table and figure out what the heck is going on. And that is what I did. I don't have an answer to that question, by the way, because I don't have all the answers yet. But I can tell you this, I am a real estate owner, and I believe we have to protect both sides.
And next up, we have Annie Brown. Annie, you have 1 minute starting now.
I believe that the short-term rental issue is a local control issue. I've talked to communities and municipal leaders up and down our shoreline, and it ranges from Haggard Shores Township, who welcomes and supports short-term rentals and who wants people and senior citizens to use that rental money for income. And it ranges down to New Buffalo and South Haven, who are working hard to find a balance between short-term rentals and year-round residences. I think that I'm also sympathetic to New Buffalo Superintendent Jeff Leslie, who said his biggest problem is a lack of affordable housing. I am not in favor of House Bill 4722 because I believe in local control. But I also believe in increasing taxes on vacation rental owners, which can then be used for affordable housing.
Thank you. And next, Joey Andrews. Mr. Andrews, you have 1 minute starting now.
Yeah, I oppose the Senate bill because it takes away local control from our local municipalities. The local municipalities already struggle enough with fighting the short-term rental issue without having to deal with the caps being completely blown off of them. I do think what the state government can do, and I do think the state government needs to get involved to help the local municipalities, is create a better toolbox of regulations and options for the municipalities. There's been some really great options created in other states and other cities around the country that range from regulating short-term rentals like hotels, making them pay lodging taxes and meet the same levels of cleanliness and security as hotels. There's also ideas being tried to create a short-term rental tax on out-of-state owners, but letting in municipality owners have their investment rental properties. Many people own these, and it's retirement income for them. So you don't want to take that option away from people if they own something in their community, but creating a toolbox of options that gives each of our municipalities the ability to approach this issue the way that's best for them.
Thank you. And lastly, for this question, Troy Rowling. Mr. Rowling, you have 1 minute starting now.
I support property rights. I support you being able to do what you want to with your house. I do not support the bill that's in Lansing. I believe in local control. I believe that if you don't like the fact that the city government is creating laws to stop you from doing a bunch of Airbnbs or whatever, you need to run for office. You need to handle it that way. I'm a conservative. I don't believe in making government bigger. I do not believe in giving them more power. That is what this would do. We do not need to give government any more power.
Thank you.
Now these last few questions are certainly a pivot from those traditionally asked by a Chamber of Commerce. However, they each represent issues of extreme personal importance to members and citizens alike. Seeing as this is likely the only forum that will take place in this primary, we would have been remiss to ignore this interest and not use it as an opportunity to help you explain your positions on the contentious topics of today. First up is the issue of abortion. With the Supreme Court's recent decision to overturn Roe v. Wade, the issue of abortion has been remanded back to individual states and their legislatures. Here in Michigan, we are among one of 7 states with a pre-Roe abortion ban that was never repealed. This law makes providing an abortion in our state a felony, except in cases where ending a pregnancy is deemed necessary to save the life of a pregnant woman. What is your position on abortion? What restrictions, if any, should the Michigan legislature place on the practice of abortion?
First person for the opportunity to answer this, Kevin Whiteford. Mr. Whiteford, you have 1 minute.
First of all, that decision said the federal government should be in the position of the residents to vote on, and that's what we believe in. I believe the federal government needs to get out of a lot of things: education, this issue, and businesses. First of all, I am pro-life. I believe in life at conception. I believe that pro-life means life at conception all the way to the end of life. When the kids get born, we need to figure out how to make them productive citizens in this country, and we need to get them productive citizens in this district, and so they stay in this district. And then at the end of their life, we have to figure out, you know what? I think it's okay that our parents die the way they want to die. I took care of my mom and dad and made sure that they died around their loved ones. Man, when we got to take loved ones away from people dying, this is crazy. I'm very pro-life from start to finish, period. Thank you.
Thank you. Next person, George Lucas. Mr. Lucas, you have 1 minute starting now.
Well, I too am pro-life. My parents had trouble having kids, so they adopted my 2 older brothers, and then boom, I came along. I guess that happens quite often. But the one thing that I learned is that both of my brothers, what rolls around in the back of their head at 3 o'clock in the morning is, would they be here today? And their fear is that if abortion, or their concern is that if abortion was as prevalent in the 1950s as it is today, would they be here?
Thank you. Next is Joey Andrews. Mr. Andrews, you have 1 minute to answer the question. Your 1 minute starts now.
Yeah, so I am pro-choice, full stop. I believe that the choice to get an abortion should be between a woman and her doctor, a woman and her family, or just the woman and herself, but not a woman and her politician. I don't think pregnancy should be political. And
hold your applause, please. Hold your applause, please.
Proud to have the endorsement of Planned Parenthood recognizing my stance and our fight on this, and proud that our campaign gathered over 100 signatures for the reproductive rights, reproductive freedom petition, which we believe will be on the ballot this year, and that I strongly hope passes, because I believe this archaic abortion ban that's sitting on our books since 1931 is an affront, not just to women, but to families, to everyone, and that is my stance.
Thank you. No applause, please. No boos either. Next up, Troy Rowling, you have 1 minute. Your 1 minute starts now.
I 100% am pro-life. I believe that the number one issue that's going to be facing the 2023 legislature is going to be that life issue. And I think that we need to have pro-life candidates in office to be able to handle that. The 1931 law is in place now. I think it needs to stay in place. It was great to receive out of everybody an exclusive endorsement by Right to Life. They believe that I would be the best person to go in to represent life in Lansing. And I am going to do that. So if you support life, support me.
Thank you. Lastly, for this question, Annie Brown. Ms. Brown, you have 1 minute starting now.
First, as the only woman sitting here, I'm the only person at this table who has experienced an ectopic pregnancy and a miscarriage in aisle 5 of our local village market. So I know that the path to parenthood can be heartbreaking. Every abortion is devastating, but that decision needs to be made between a woman and her doctor. As for the 1931 abortion law, When that was signed into law, my mother was 14. My grandmother had only been voting for 10 years, and Herbert Hoover was president. We are not going back to Hooverville.
Thank you.
Next question. Last month, President Biden signed bipartisan legislation that expands background checks on gun buyers under the age of 21, increases investment in our mental health system, and provides additional funds for states to carry out red flag laws that allow authorities to temporarily confiscate guns from any person found by a judge to be too dangerous to possess them. What is your position on gun control? Did the federal legislation go too far or not far enough? And if elected, what would you encourage that the state do to keep our schools and communities safe from gun violence?
First person to answer this one will be Kevin Whiteford. Mr. Whiteford, you have 1 minute starting now.
I am a Second Amendment person, period. You don't whack away at it. Before you know it, we want to have guns. The first thing is, you know, the red flag laws, that gives power to the federal government to say, you know what, I don't really like this guy. I'm not sure, maybe he is mentally incapable and I'm going to take his guns away. No, I don't believe in the red flag laws. You know, I believe that if we chip away at this Second Amendment, we're in trouble. And I don't want to do that. And so I am very pro-gun. I think reasonable people are reasonable people. They could have the right to own a gun. And so I don't like the federal government chipping away at this. So I'm against it.
Thank you. Next up, Joey Andrews. Mr. Andrews, you have 1 minute starting now.
You know, I was 10 years old when Columbine happened, and I remember from that day on, anytime anybody walked up to a school when I was sitting in a classroom, always being at least somewhat nervous about what that person who was walking up to our school was maybe about to do. And in the about 25 years since Columbine, we have done less than nothing. We have tried nothing, and it has not worked. In fact, I would argue that it has gotten exponentially worse since then. And I think maybe we should just try something for a change. I think the federal law is a good start at something. I think we could do little things like raising the age to buy a gun to 21, increasing waiting periods and background checks. In a lot of cases, just a simple waiting period would save somebody from suicide or prevent a mass shooting. I think there is more we can do from there, and I think most people agree that common sense gun laws would be a positive, but my God, let's do something.
Thank you. Next, we have Troy Rolling. Mr. Rolling, you have 1 minute starting now.
I am very pro Second Amendment. I believe we need to protect the Second Amendment. We continue to create laws to attack or go against law-abiding citizens. These are the people that you should be going after. People that commit crimes do not care about laws, period. If they want to, you put a law on a gun, they'll go get a knife or a car. They all do the same thing. If you wanted to create a law, a mandatory 1 year law for somebody who get caught robbing a place with a gun in hand. I mean, if you want to create a law, but don't create laws that will affect law-abiding citizens. I mean, yes, we do have a mental health issue in this going on right now. These are the things that we need to be looking at. We don't need to go after people who handles guns right and do the right things with guns.
Thank you. Next up, Annie Brown. Mrs. Brown, you have 1 minute. Your 1 minute starts now.
Last year, husband and wife were shot and killed on the pier in South Haven. That happened 913 steps from my front door. And something does need to be done. I support safe storage laws. That means in a locked gun cabinet with a trigger lock or a cable lock. I believe in expanding background checks and increasing the age required to own a gun. The young man who killed the husband and wife and then turned the gun on himself was 19. But that man also lived in a county that does not have inpatient facilities for young adults with bipolarism, depression, anxiety off the charts, and suicidal thoughts.
Thank you.
So that's what we need to.
Next, last person to answer this question, George Lucas. Mr. Lucas, you have 1 minute starting now.
Well, I support the Second Amendment to the Constitution. I believe that people should have the right to bear arms. And where I get a little concerned is that a lot of the angst about gun violence gets pointed at people who are honest people. They're honest gun owners. And I get a little tired of, something happens, somebody passes a bunch of laws, everybody forgets about it. The supermarket shooting in Buffalo, New York has a red flag law. That person was a classic example of somebody that should have been taken out of circulation because of his mental health, and they just slid through the system. So passing laws that are meaningless, that are not enforced, and harassed honest gun owners are unacceptable to me. I think the problem is with criminals and with those who are mentally ill, and I would like to see our country maybe spend a little more time on law enforcement, maybe a little more money too.
Thank you.
And solve the problem.
Thank you.
Next question. There are still a number of citizens who question the results of the 2020 presidential election. And while it's certainly the most recent example, it's far from the first time a losing party has been reticent to outright accept the loss. Do you personally believe that the 2020 election was stolen? What legislative reforms, if any, would you support to combat potential fraud and ensure election integrity moving forward?
First person to answer this, Joey Andrews. Mr. Andrews, you have 1 minute. Your 1 minute starts now.
There was no election fraud. Joe Biden won the election fair and square. I worked that election cycle. I was a regional field director in Michigan for the Southwest Michigan area for the Biden and Peters campaign. There was no way imaginable that any fraud could have been committed. I always, honestly, I always challenge people, and I tell them, if you think that any political party or institution is capable of this sort of fraud, you need to work on a campaign for a cycle and see what kind of absolute chaos and mismanagement they are. There is no way anybody could coordinate that scale of fraud. It's just not possible. As far as election integrity goes, I mean, election integrity is important. We should always be looking to move towards more fair, safe elections every way we can. I'm a big fan of the changes we made to our election law in Proposal 3, and would love to see the Promote the Vote passed this year as well to continue expanding access to the ballots to more and more citizens in this state. But no, Joe Biden won the election.
Thank you. Next up, George Lucas. Mr. Lucas, you have 1 minute. Your 1 minute starts now.
The 2020 election was Donald Trump's to lose, and he lost it. And I can say that with some confidence, just based on the number of friends I have that voted for President Trump the first time, but not the second time. So the fact that he lost doesn't surprise me. Election integrity does concern me. The walk list that I use to go out and knock on doors is based on voter lists. And I can't tell you how many homes I've been to where the people are dead or they moved. And I know that for a fact because I knew the people. The legislature sent Governor Whitmer a bill this year that would have just wanted to check on anybody who's a registered voter who hasn't voted for the last 20 years, just to verify if they're still in circulation. And she vetoed it. And it's actions like that that really cause the situation where people could question an election because.
Thank you. Next is Annie Brown. Annie, you have 1 minute. Your 1 minute starts now.
No, I don't think there was any fraud, and Trump lost. Our Republican election officials even agree that there was no fraud. And I trust our Michigan clerks who have done a good job and worked hard on our elections. So I believe them, and it was something that we all learned when we're running for class president in the 6th grade. you lose, you move on. And I also support Promote the Vote. I've been a mom with 3 little kids trying to vote, and I would appreciate more flexibility, and I love the reforms that have happened so far.
Thank you. Next up, Troy Rolling. Mr. Rolling, you have 1 minute. Your 1 minute starts now.
I think there was serious election integrity issues. I think that people don't trust our election process anymore, especially in the state of Michigan. A simple thing like cleaning the election rolls and making sure that people that are deceased are no longer on them. People that are moved are no longer on them. I have a friend of mine who lives in a house and he gets 8 or 9 registrations for absentee ballots for people that has lived at his house prior. I mean, we are blanket sending people registration forms to vote. Now, how many people are actually not filling those out and sending them in? I mean, we have some serious questions about the 2020 election cycle, and I think we need to look at it.
And next up, last one for this question, Kevin Whiteford. Mr. Whiteford, you have 1 minute. Your 1 minute starts now.
President Biden is the president right now. That's unfortunate, right? We see the results right now. The bottom line is I voted for Trump in 16 and 20. The clear thing that hasn't been said is that when you knock on doors and you talk to tons and tons of people, the people out there for sure question what happened. It's not just the legislators. It's not just me. It's a lot of people. So we definitely had an integrity problem. We had a breach, right? So the legislators currently created 11 laws that were passed by the House and the Senate and vetoed by the president or by the governor. I think we have to address the issues that were caused, and we would love to do that. Let's face it, voter ID. We got to have voter ID. I mean, come on. You need voter ID for everything. Get a voter ID so you can vote. So the bottom line is there are certain things that would improve the integrity of future elections, which is what we have to work on and make sure it happens. Thank you.
Thank you.
Candidates, this is our 14th and final question of the evening. It also doubles as your closing statement. Please share why voters should vote for you and what differentiates you from your primary opponent.
First person to have an opportunity to do that is Annie Brown. Annie, you have 1 minute.
So what differentiates me? I'm a woman. And I'd like to talk about my experience. I worked for U.S. Senator Carl Levin and for U.S. Senator Gary Peters, so I am ready to hit the ground running. And I was raised by 2 amazing parents. Today's my mom's birthday. She died of breast cancer when I was 30. But my mom and dad raised me to be tough. My mom stood up in the middle of Mass when I was in high school and scolded the priest for criticizing our village council and our local school board in the church bulletin. That is how she raised me to be tough. I eat nails for breakfast. I chew up mediocrity and spit it out. That's the fearless leadership I will take with me to our legislature.
Thank you, Mrs. Brown. Next up, Joey Andrews. Mr. Andrews, you have 1 minute. Your 1 minute starts now.
I would say the important thing is that we have term limits in Michigan, and you only get 6 years in the legislature, which means you need to be able to hit the ground running from day one, the minute you get to the legislature. Otherwise, you risk not being able to accomplish anything while you're there, or getting overrun by the lobbyists who have all the institutional knowledge. As an attorney and a policy analyst, I work on policy, I read laws, I understand how they're constructed. I'm ready from day one to begin working on legislation and representing and fighting for our communities. I'm also somebody who's been on the ground here working for more than 6 years in our communities, organizing in Benton Harbor, working in Southwest Michigan as a regional field director. I have been in touch with people on the ground for several years, listening to their issues, and I have been acting ahead of being in office. We're already working on bringing workplace training centers into places like Benton Harbor. We're already working on improving mass transit systems and access in our communities. With me, you get somebody who is ready to start from day one because I've already started.
Thank you. Next up, George Lucas. Mr. Lucas, you have 1 minute. That 1 minute starts now.
I have very deep feelings for Southwestern Michigan. I've spent countless hours of my time working to make this area better through my nonprofit activities, and public service is a logical extension to that. Through my experiences, I know how to lead, I know how to solve problems, I know how to build consensus, and I know how to get things done. One of the things, or some of the themes that I hear most commonly on the doors is people are tired of noise. They're looking for somebody with common sense to represent them, and they want to get things done. They want our country and our state to improve. And I have all those qualities. So if you're interested in improving the quality of life in Southwestern Michigan and Michigan in general, I offer calm, confident leadership, and I would appreciate your support on August 2nd.
Thank you. Next up, Troy Rolling. Mr. Rolling, you have 1 minute. That 1 minute starts now.
So I am a servant. Part of what I do in, day out is to serve people and to help them deal with the things that they need to do in life. That comes with the level of customer service and to be able to help people with the things that they need. You need somebody that has that ability to be able to connect on a day in and day out basis. I think, and I might be wrong, I think I'm the only person that was actually born and raised in Southwest Michigan. I don't know if that, I said, I think, all right. But that makes a difference because of value system. I was endorsed by 80 million Patriots, Citizens for Traditional Values, ABC, and I got the support of We the Parents. They believe in the parental rights and education being an important thing.
Thank you. And lastly, Kevin Whiteford. Mr. Whiteford, you have 1 minute. That 1 minute starts now.
People, you guys need a representative that's going to represent the 38th district, specifically this district. This district is loaded with small businesses. I have businesses entrenched in Van Buren County, Allegan County, and Berrien County, big time. I have clients throughout this district. I know this district. I have exclusive endorsement by Michigan Chamber, the Detroit Chamber, Michigan Manufacturers Association, Retailers Association is behind me. They know I'm going to work hard to increase the businesses in this community, period, because we need it. Because we need jobs, and I want my kids and grandkids to stay here. I'm telling you that right now. If you want your kids and grandkids to stay here, I'm the guy who's going to make it happen. And so I want your vote August 2nd, period. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to all of our candidates. Appreciate you taking the time to sit with us and talk about all these things in front of not only the folks that are here at the Shadowland Ballroom, but also those watching at home live, but also watching this later. This is, I think, a very important thing. And I appreciate Arthur and the Southwest Michigan Regional Chamber for helping us out with this. Anything you'd like to say?
Candidates, I want to thank you for coming today. This is not a prepared statement, but I want you to look out at the room and see the amount of interest that folks have taken in this race, and know that there are thousands more following, whether it's on Facebook Live or on the radio. And whichever one of you gets elected, and one of you will get elected, remember, it's these faces that you're going to be serving. They're the ones that you want to help prosper and help grow. Don't forget that. That's what running is really about. So thank you for being here. Thank you for putting your name on the line, putting your name on the ballot. It's no easy task. And thank you, everyone, for coming and being more informed. And our area will be better for it. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And I definitely want to second that. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for the Southwest Michigan Regional Chamber for hosting this. And you're listening to News Talk Sports 94.9 WSJM. Thank you to the Shadowland Ballroom as well as for hosting this. Thank you to our technical support from Ken Kiesbert and TPC Technologies, as well as video support from Ryan Cheevers of Little Red Fern, and our wonderful engineering team of Terry Green and Zach East. And you can watch this video at WSJM.com. I'm Johnny Reinhart from News Talk Sports 94.9 WSJM. Thank you and good night.